Hello, welcome to Lei's Looking Glass. I'm Lei. Let me tell you the story about a man with extraordinary abilities, someone who could see the future. He advised some of the most powerful people in China, but the most astonishing prediction he gave was about the fate of the communist regime. Our story begins in the spring of 1990, in the remote northern city of Wudalianchi, Heilongjiang. A new party secretary had just taken office, a 39-year-old man named Li Jing, who was originally from Beijing. In his teenager years, he had answered the party's call to help develop China's northern frontier. Eventually, he had settled permanently in that bitter cold, snowy land, a political order he couldn't refuse. Even though he was already the party secretary of the city, Li's real goal was to make it back to Beijing, closer to his aging parents, and more importantly, closer to real power. One afternoon, he overheard a group of young staffers talking about a mysterious man named Wang Enqing, who is a psychic, and his predictions were uncannily accurate. Li Jing, who grew up as a Marxist atheist, shook his head. To him, this was textbook superstition, nonsense that young people had been fooled into believing. Then, not long after, something happened that shook the entire city government. The deputy mayor's wife was killed in a car accident. Word spread that Wang Enqing, the psychic, had warned her about it in advance. She didn't heed the warning and died on that very day. The story caught fire. Even government officials were whispering about it. Secretary Li was furious. To him, this wasn't just superstition. It was politically dangerous and could even jeopardize his career. So he decided to confront the deputy mayor and ask him to publicly refute the rumors. But the conversation didn't go the way he expected. The deputy mayor confirmed that the psychic, who was nicknamed Half-Immortal Wang, was a poor farmer from a nearby village. He didn't seek fame or wealth, but people came to him for help. The mayor's wife had been stressed out over some family problems. A friend suggested she consult Half-Immortal Wang, so she went. But instead of addressing her family issues, Wang told her something else entirely. Your family matter is minor. The real problem is with you. You are facing serious danger. She asked how to avoid it. Wang gave her a date and told her to stay home that day, not to leave the house under any circumstance. She was unsure what to make of it, so told her husband anyway. The deputy mayor, though skeptical, took the warning seriously. He reminded her the day before, "Tomorrow is the day, take the day off and stay at home," and his wife agreed. But the next morning, she received a call from a superior asking her to go to the office. She hesitated, but ultimately decided to go. She got into a car and headed off. She was killed in a multi-car accident. When Secretary Li heard this firsthand from the deputy mayor, even he, a lifelong atheist and party loyalist, was shaken. This wasn't some rumor or gossip. Something in Li's worldview had begun to crack. Not long after that, Wang Enqing's name was mentioned again. A prisoner had escaped from a labor camp, and the police couldn't find him. Then one of the officers suggested to get help from the half-immortal. Other police laughed it off at first, but eventually they went to ask. Wang Enqing told them exactly where to look. The police followed his directions, and just like that, they found the fugitive, dead on. This wasn't supposed to happen in communist China, a country that prides itself on so-called atheist ideology. Officially, the Communist Party is atheist to the core, but the truth is, behind closed doors, ordinary people and even party members are fascinated by the supernatural. Divination, astrology, and fortune-telling are surprisingly popular. Party Secretary Li couldn't ignore it anymore. He needed to find out for himself who this half-immortal Wang is. Of course, it wouldn't look good if the party's top leader just showed up at a fortune teller's door. So he sent a staffer named Teng Zhenfu. He handed Tun a slip of paper with his birthday and said, "Pretend this is your relative's birthday. Ask him for a reading. Let's see if he can tell." After Tun arrived at Wang's place, he handed over the paper and said it was from his cousin in Shandong. Wang Enqing took the note, glanced at it, and fell into deep thought for a few minutes. Suddenly, he fixed his gaze on the visitor and said, "You're trying to fool me, aren't you? That birthday doesn't belong to some cousin from Shandong. It belongs to your boss, the party secretary of our city, Li Jing." Tun was so stunned, he rushed back to tell his boss. That did it. Secretary Li decided to meet Wang in person. On a dark night, with no official cars, Li and Tun arrived. Tun stood watch outside while Li quietly stepped into Wang's shabby cottage. Li asked Wang for a face reading. Wang looked him over and began recounting key events from his past, childhood, career, even his marriage and children. Then he began describing deeply personal, private matters, things no one else should have known. To Wang, Li's life was like an open book. To Li, it felt like being hit by a lightning bolt. Everything he thought he knew, his atheist worldview, his party values, collapsed at that moment. He sat in awe, like a student before a master. "Please," he asked, "tell me, what does my future hold? Will I rise higher in government? Will I ever make it back to Beijing?" Wang spoke plainly. "You've done a good job in the city. People respect you. From the outside, you look like a rising star in Heilongjiang. But no matter how well you do, you won't be promoted here. This place isn't where your fate lies. Within 3 years, you and your family will move south. A benefactor will help make it happen." Li asked, "Who is this benefactor?" Wang didn't answer directly, but said, "You'll find out soon." Wudalianchi, the city where all of this began, is famous for its volcanic landscape. The name literally means 5 connected pools, and it dates back to the reign of Emperor Kangxi in the Qing dynasty. Between 1719 and 1721, a series of volcanic eruptions in the area created 5 lava-dammed lakes, hence the name. Over time, the region became a tourist spot. In the summer of 1991, He Xin, a scholar and a member of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC, was sent by the State Council to inspect border trade in Heilongjiang. On his way back, he suddenly remembered the famous volcanic sites in Wudalianchi. It was an impulsive decision. He told his team they'd head there immediately. That same night, they checked into the municipal guest house in Wudalianchi. The moment He Xin walked through the guest house doors, someone approached him and said, "Party Secretary Li has been waiting for you." He Xin was baffled. How did anyone know he was coming? His decision to visit the place was totally last minute. He didn't contact anyone at all, so how on earth had this Secretary Li anticipated his arrival? He Xin followed the man into the dining room. Party Secretary Li rose from his seat and said, "I knew you were coming several days ago. I have been waiting for you since last night. I didn't even know I was coming until this evening. How did you know?" Li smiled. "I have a friend, a very special one, who can see both the past and the future." "You must take me to meet this person," He said. Later that evening, they made their way to Wang Enqing's cottage. Without any introductions, Wang said to He Xin, "You hold high position, but it's not a formal post, and you move in and out of the palace freely." He Xin was no ordinary scholar. After the Tiananmen Square crackdown in 1989, when many intellectuals sympathized with the students, he publicly supported the government's use of force. His stance was controversial and widely resented by his peers, but caught the attention of Premier Li Peng, who ordered the crackdown on the students. In 1991, the premier quietly arranged a new role for He Xin as a special member of the CPPCC, offering policy suggestions. His memos often landed directly on Deng Xiaoping's desk. He Xing thus became an unofficial advisor within Zhongnanhai. So it's true that he held no formal position, but moved in and out of Zhongnanhai freely. Alarmed by how much Wang seemed to know, He Xing immediately suggested they speak in private. Before leaving, He invited Wang to visit Beijing, but Wang gave him a cryptic reply. "Thank you. Meeting you has opened my heavenly gate, but it may also have opened the gates of hell." Later that year, in late 1991, He Xing used his connections to have Li Jing transferred back to Beijing. Just like Wang had predicted, Li and his family moved south of Heilongjiang. On the day of his departure, Wang came to see him off and slipped him a note. Once Li was on the train, he opened the note. Inside was a prediction that after returning to Beijing, he would be given a major new role, not in politics, but in the arts. Meanwhile, He Xing had already brought Wang Enqing to Beijing. While there, He and a friend decided to test Wang's abilities again. They compiled a list of birth dates, some of famous people like Queen Elizabeth II, the Emperor of Japan, China's famed writers from the past. Others belonged to relatives, a nanny, and random acquaintances. They handed the mixed list to Wang, who squinted at it and said, "What is this? You've got Chinese and foreigners, living and dead, emperors, poets, and even a housemaid." He Xing and his friend were totally stunned. After that, word of Wang Enqing's ability spread through Beijing. He became quietly famous among the movers and shakers of the city. Even officials inside Zhongnanhai, the CCP's leadership compound, began consulting him. Wang was housed in luxury places like the Capitol Hotel, the Shangri-La, and even the ultra-exclusive Diaoyutai State Guest House, which is usually reserved for visiting heads of state. At the time, China was swept up in a nationwide interest in Qigong and spiritual practices. People were fascinated with supernatural abilities and the celestial eye, or the third eye, located just above the space between the eyebrows. This third eye was said to allow the seer to perceive things beyond our space and time. Many believe that Wang Enqing had this supernormal ability to look into the future, and he may well have been the last known fortune teller to regularly visit Zhongnanhai. What did he tell China's top leaders? No one knows. But there have long been whispers that Wang predicted the fate of the communist regime. But before we get into that, let's talk about the man's final days. Wang had always seemed healthy and energetic. However, in the summer of 1997, he suddenly passed away. Wang was only about 60 years old. Earlier in 1997, a wealthy businessman from Hong Kong had invited him to visit as his personal advisor. All the paperwork had been taken care of. Wang was supposed to travel to Hong Kong, but he declined, at least for the time being. He told the businessman that, according to his own fate, he had a tribulation to pass, a karmic trial that he could not avoid. And the Dragon Boat Festival in 1997 was his appointed day. If he made it through that day safely, he believed his remaining years would go smoothly and he would go to Hong Kong. But if he didn't make it, Wang said, then I probably won't live much longer. So, on the day of the Dragon Boat Festival, Wang stayed home, trying to avoid any calamity. As evening approached, he felt hopeful, like the danger had passed. He grew excited and decided to visit an old friend, the abbot of a nearby temple. Unfortunately, that night, someone had stolen the donation money from the temple, and the staff called the police. When Wang arrived, the main gate had already been locked by the police, but he knew the place too well. There was a small opening in the rear wall of the temple grounds. Wang hesitated for a moment, feeling uneasy, but he didn't really want to go back home without seeing his friend. So he crawled through the opening, Just then, a security guard spotted him. Assuming he was the thief, the guard attacked him on the spot. Wang was beaten badly, and he lost consciousness. When the monks recognized him, they rushed him to a hospital. At the hospital, he refused medical treatment. A few days later, he passed away. Before his death, he said, "I've revealed too many secrets of heaven. Now I must face the punishment." In hindsight, if Wang didn't help so many CCP leaders, his fate may be different. Even if he had stayed at home until after midnight on that fateful evening, he might have avoided the tragedy and lived. The same can be said about the wife of the deputy mayor, who took chances against her fate. Why did Wang refuse medical treatment? He probably knew it's useless because he had failed to pass the tribulation, and it is his destiny. After Li Jing returned to Beijing, he made a career shift, becoming a writer. He retired as deputy party secretary and vice chairman of the Beijing Federation of Literary and Art Circles. Just as one had predicted, his final post was not in politics but in the arts. Either Li or He ever dared to mention one of Wang's most chilling predictions, one that had been quietly passed down for years in Wu Da Lian Chi. It was a prophecy directly tied to the fate of the Chinese Communist Party. The PRC's national flag has 5 stars. The 5-star design was personally approved by Mao Zedong, who reportedly chose it based on a line from Shi Ji, the records of the grand historian. When 5 stars appear in the East, it is auspicious for China. To Mao, it was a heavenly omen for a new dynasty. Ironically, the founder of the Communist China may have unknowingly chosen a design that foretold its downfall. The CCP declares that the large star on the national flag represents the Communist Party, while the 4 smaller stars stand for the workers, peasants, petty bourgeoisie, and national bourgeoisie, symbolizing the people under party leadership. But Half-Immortal Wang had a very different take of the flag. He believed those 5 stars carried a coded expiration date for the Red CCP dynasty. He believed the 5 stars actually represent the 5 generations of top CCP leaders, starting with Mao Zedong, which was the big star. One also pointed out that the red background of the flag in Chinese metaphysics represents fire, and in a year ruled by the element of fire, a Bing fire year, Bing Huo Nian, he predicted the communist era will come to an end. When is the next Bing fire year? 2026. Even more uncanny, Xi Jinping, the current CCP leader, is the 5th generation leader, and according to Wang's prediction, the last one of the Red CCP dynasty. So, is Wang Enqing's prophecy true? Will 2026 mark the end of the CCP and Xi Jinping's rule? We may be able to find out soon. After Wang's death, He Xing wrote a tribute to him, and his closing statement was this: "There is a fixed order in the universe. What we call the universe is but the design of a supreme intelligence, and human beings are just small, insignificant parts of that design." And that, my friends, is the end of today's story. If you find it interesting, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow my channel so you won't miss what's coming next. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.